Hi, everyone. It's Kate Byers here to talk to you today about imposter syndrome. So super excited that we're going to be chatting about this. Imposter syndrome is something that was actually discovered back in 1978 by a couple of researchers who were studying 150 high achieving women. That sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? So again, guys, welcome to today's broadcast. My name is Kate Byers, and our company helps high achieving women, executive women, really create work-life balance and not have to step back from your career. There's no way that we need to, there's no reason that we have to make a trade-off and no reason that we have to sacrifice our happiness for a career. You can have fulfillment, freedom, and really have a huge footprint. So what we're going to talk about today is imposter syndrome. And sorry if I'm stuttering. I'm always having to try to look and see if we're actually broadcasting live. So let me just jump over here and see if I see myself. Yes, we do. All right. So imposter syndrome. So this is really, really, really common. Okay. And I'll share a little bit of my own personal history with it and what we help with our clients with. But basically, imposter syndrome is that even though everyone else is telling you that you're brilliant, that you're amazing, that you have just, you've got it all. Wow, you're so confident. Inside, you don't feel that way. You don't feel like you're as intelligent as you could be or as everyone else thinks you are. You don't feel like you're as capable, and you honestly don't feel like you're as deserving. So someone can tell you, wow, you are so amazing. Every time you get up and present in front of a room, you are just, the epitome of confidence. And you're like, oh, they're just saying that. They just said that to make me happy. They just said that because they want something from me. And we make all these excuses. And so the stuff goes on in our head where instead of living with joy for the career that we've built, for the potential that we have, the value we bring, we're living in this really diminished state of fear, of self-criticism, of feeling we're not good enough, and that someday they are going to find out that we're really not as good as we are. Now, where we see this a lot is with really high achieving, highly successful women who have just jammed up that corporate ladder, been promoted very quickly, moved up very quickly, proven themselves very quickly. And what can happen is because you've moved so quickly, you really never had a lot of that time, right, to sort of settle in at any one career level. And so when you go really, really quick, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, now I'm a whatever, insert the title here. And I don't know if I'm really qualified to do this, right? I don't know everything that I'm supposed to know. I'm not sure that oh God, I've moved up too quickly. I took on too much. Or do you ever find yourself, for example, someone says, hey, I need someone to take on this huge project, and it's obviously high profile. It's got some amazing capacity for growth potential, promotion potential, and you raise your hand, as all of us high achievers do. We go, yeah, I'll take it. And afterwards, you're like, oh dear God, what have I done? Have you ever done that? And you're like, how am I ever going to get this done? I should have taken this on. And then we go home and we're gnashing our teeth. We're staying awake, endless nights. We're doing double time on the weekends to try to catch up because we don't feel like we're good enough. That imposter syndrome has sunken in, and they are going to find out that we really don't know what we're doing. Okay. Now, here is what really trips people up is when you are trying to really overcome imposter syndrome, because I think that one of the problems we have right now is that as women, we're like, yeah, we all have imposter syndrome. You'll be fine. You're good. Is that we talk past it and we act like it's something that either A, is only happening to us, or it happens to everyone, and that we just have to live with it. It's almost like guilt. I think in our society now, it's like working women guilt. Yeah, everybody has guilt. No. You should not have guilt as a working woman, okay? So guilt is a sign, imposter syndrome is a sign. And where therapy, where coaching has really failed us in this form is that we tend to get too focused on the logical piece of imposter syndrome. So for example, you may be talking to your therapist, your coach, or your colleague, and you're saying, when you can finally get to that point of admitting, I really feel like I'm not good enough in this position. I really feel like I don't have what it takes. And I know I shouldn't feel that way, but that's how I feel. What will happen is people will talk over it through a logic-based discussion, and that's not going to help you in the long run, right? They'll say, well, what do you mean you don't feel capable of, let's just say, giving that presentation? Well, of course you're going to be great. Well, just practice a little bit more, what could really happen? You know that your family still loves you. No matter how much you fail at that presentation, you'll be fine. And, you know, a lot of times psychologists will say, well, why don't you stop presenting then? You know, why do you keep putting yourself in a position where you have to give presentations that make you so nervous and upset and anxious? Why don't you find a different role in your company? So there's always this sense of either needing to move away from the discomfort or to talk over it and just be like, oh, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. You'll get over it. And in the moment when that person is saying that to you, it probably feels very comforting. But you still have to go back home and go to bed at night and deal with that, right? And then as we're laying in the quiet of the night, that's where there's anxiety. That's where the Zoloft comes out, the bottle of wine, the chocolate, or whatever else, right? Because we're trying to medicate that feeling of anxiety that someday someone's going to find out I'm not really capable of doing these things. Okay. So you guys have heard me talk about before is that what happens is as a high achiever, one of our programming pieces from our childhood is that we're very focused inward. Okay, we're always self-evaluating and we're self-critical of, am I doing a good enough job? Have I done everything I could have? Have I driven myself hard enough? And this self-critic is what is also driving this imposter piece, because your self-critic is so thirsty for validation, is that no matter what your self-critic hears, it's still going to criticize you. Okay, so that's just related to that imposter piece, right? No matter what you hear externally or you tell yourself internally, you are still going to feel like an imposter. All right, well, why does that matter, right? Who cares? All right, so you feel nervous sometimes, you feel anxiety. It goes so much deeper than that. And I really want to explain this because we have several fantastic new clients. And one of them was saying to me, she's like, you know, I've just been selected to give this presentation in front of a pretty significant audience of leadership and influencers. It's a huge win for her to be selected to do this. And instead of being like, yeah, look at, like, I have worked so hard. I've, you know, all of the years of training, all of the knowledge I've acquired, all the talent that I naturally bring to the table, instead of feeling just joy over this moment in her career that should be so special and so cool, she's just like, oh, they don't really want me to present. Oh, they're just putting me in there just as a placeholder. Oh, they'll probably get someone else. Oh, I don't think he really means it. I think he feels like he has to put me in there. Like, you know, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like this is a moment. It's a memory. It's an experience of your life that should be full of joy, that should be reverberating in your soul and go, this is so cool that I get to go do this amazing presentation and this speech at this, you know, convention center in front of all these people. And instead, her critic, her imposter is saying, yeah, they don't really want you. You're just, you know, you got lucky. It's not really about your talent, okay? And no matter what we do from a therapeutic and a coaching perspective, typically what happens is people will talk about how can we get you conditioned and build the willpower to go do that one thing without fear. Okay, and you could do that, right? You could spend days, weeks, months, whatever you need to condition someone to show up to present and not feel fear. But they're still not going to feel joy, and they're still not going to solve the issue of imposter syndrome. Okay, and this is where I think so many leadership programs, so many coaching programs, so many therapists. I mean, a lot of the women we coach and are clients of ours, they've been with therapists for years, and they'll say, "My God, Kate, like what you're sharing with us about our psychology is more eye-opening and more illuminating and is healing me more than years of therapy." And it truly is, because you have to get below the surface if you're going to root out imposter syndrome, okay? So you have to find, where did imposter syndrome start? Because what imposter syndrome is doing, it is protecting your esteem. And esteem is one of your 7 needs, right? So if you understand human behavior, we all have a need for esteem. And the way esteem is wired is one of 2 ways. One part of esteem is believing that we're capable. Okay, so we're out hunting and gathering. We have to believe we're capable of doing that. Otherwise, we're going to curl up in a ball and die. So this is something that we've evolved to have as a survival mechanism. And the second thing is that we're deserving of surviving and thriving. If we don't feel like we're valuable, well, then why do I belong in the clan of hunters and gatherers or whatever we're doing here, right? So you have to believe that you are valuable. I'm a valuable member of the clan, let's just say the tribe, and I'm capable of being a member of this tribe. Okay, these are all evolutionary pieces that are happening in your biology and psychology, whether you know about it or not. When you start to understand this, you can start seeing how our culture and today's culture has actually minimized our ability to survive and thrive because we've deadened this awareness, but we've also created these false senses of what esteem really is. So today, if I just met you on the street, what would you say success looks like? Someone who works hard, someone who sacrifices, someone who gets it done, someone who doesn't make mistakes, someone who has money, someone who has position, title, all these things, right? We live in an achievement culture. Believe it or not, there's a lot of cultures out there in the world, indigenous cultures, that don't believe the same thing, which tells us it's not objective, right? So it's just, it's opinion versus a logical way of living, which means if you understand that, it means you can change it and you can make success be whatever you want it to be. You can still have money, you can still have position, you can still have title, but it doesn't mean it has to come with sacrifice and hard work. It just means that you get to define success on your terms. Okay, so now we're lightening the load because we're getting out from under some cultural norms, which are just choosing ways of people choose to believe, and getting actually down to the reality of what we're dealing with, which is science. So with imposter syndrome, what we have to do is get back to this place where our esteem is trying to say, our esteem has since been damaged through our culture and through our, whether it's through childhood and the way we were raised, or whether it's through schooling, or just the cultural memes that we see out there as we're raised. Our culture tells us that you are only valuable for what you do, right? Because everything I just described as success was what you did. I bought a big house. I got promoted at work. I earned a big paycheck. I went to a really prestigious school. Whatever, blah, blah, blah. I did. And what we have to do is rewire our mind back to our original nature, which is what we're born with as babies, that says you're valuable for who you are. You're capable. Your children are not born going, I wonder if I could walk or not. Would I be capable of walking? They just believe that they can. And when they're ready to developmentally, they just go and walk, right? And they fall down a bunch and they fail and they get up and they do it again. That's been taken away from us. And so what imposter syndrome really is it's protecting the subconscious belief that you're either not valuable or you're not capable. And that's what you have to root out and resolve, because as long as there's a subconscious undertone, and this happens much more with women, this is where this comes up with women much more than with men, because we're taught to be good girls and we're taught to act in certain ways, and boys will be boys, but girls have to be good and all this stuff, right? So if you don't get below the surface of the logic of the, oh, don't worry about what other people think of you and all that, you've got to get below there and say, well, my subconscious does care what people think of me. My subconscious doesn't believe I'm capable. My subconscious is telling me it's scared that I may not truly be valuable. And if that is not dealt with and effectively and uprooted, if that protection mechanism still resides in you, then imposter syndrome just continues and continues, okay? And it never goes away. Again, you could beat it to death for a certain situation, like a presentation or something, and you could just, pound your psychology into submission, but that's exhausting. And that is a lot of sleepless nights. That is a lot of wine nights with the girls. That's a lot of lamentation with your husband. That's a lot of Zoloft to take the edge off, just to get through one experience that truly in life should be beautiful and exciting. And when you do this rewiring, what is so amazing is that it's not that fear goes away. It's just that fear is part of the fabric of life. It's just like, yeah, okay, so I have fear. It's kind of daunting to get up on stage in front of a bunch of people and talk to them. I do want to do a good job and I want to make sure everyone gets the information they need, but I'm not frozen by it. There's joy in it. There's enjoyment of the possibility in the process versus, oh dear God, let me just get through this. They all think I'm a fraud anyways. They're going to find out because I'm going to screw up and it's all about you. Now you go forward into like this presentation going, I wonder what this audience really needs. How could I speak to them? How could I really help them walk away with having an amazing experience? The focus turns outward versus inward, and the experience turns into one of joy, of curiosity, of learning, of possibility. And there's just freedom, and there's just effortless, and lightness of being when you learn to live this way. So much of what, at least in our company, we call it work-life balance, has less to do with, should I get a nanny or a crock pot, or should I be home at 5 or work till 7 and all that kind of stuff. That's great. it's about how can I free myself? How can I free my mind? How can I start creating possibilities in my life based on freeing me, right? And so, you know, a couple of stories that I'll just share real quick before I jump off. Like for me, the imposter syndrome was so insidious. Like I would, well, speaking of public speaking, I remember the first time I was offered an opportunity to speak. I'd spoken boardrooms before, and certainly a lot of very important and prestigious meetings and client meetings and things like that. But I was probably 27 years old, maybe. And the director of my department, she was pregnant. She wasn't able to go and present this new product launch. And we were supposed to give this presentation. It was actually overseas in Russia to an audience of 3,000 women. Now, I had never spoken on a stage that large before. I'd never spoken at a podium. I'd never spoken with teleprompters. Like this was all new to me. And being a high achiever, of course, the first thing I said was, oh, of course she asked if I would go do this for her because she was pregnant, didn't want to travel. And I said, oh, of course I would. I obviously realized this was a huge opportunity, that I was being selected out of the team to be her voice. Like, what a big deal. So the achiever says yes. And the imposter said, oh, dear God, what have I just done? I was terrified. And for weeks beforehand, I mean, I practiced and practiced and practiced my speech. I had hives. I was breaking out in a sweat. When the day came for me to get on the airplane, I'm calling my father. He's coming over to give me like a Valium. Like it was just horrible. And I'm not the kind of person who even takes medicine. So here I was, just paralyzed by this experience that should have been such joy. That should have been just like, oh my God, this is such like a game changer. This is so exciting. I get to go speak to these women and I get to deliver this beautiful message that's going to help change their lives. Certainly is going to change my life. And I still have pictures of that particular presentation to this day. And there's just pictures of me, like, I don't know, can you all see my hands? Like my hands were on the podium, just like death grip. I'm just like terrified, like just, oh my God, like there's like no blood in my face. There was no joy in the experience. And it was a game changer for my career. It was an incredible experience. Fortunately, after that, I learned how to present much more effectively. But the imposter syndrome stayed with me. There was another time in a meeting, also in Russia, very funny, all these memories, where I was at there was a conference table, and there was like the leadership team was at the conference table, and then those of us that were not in the leadership team were sort of like standing around. We were like invited into the meeting for a certain period of time, and I remember listening to what everyone was saying, and I thought, oh my God, I have a great thing I could say. Like, look at me, I'm so smart. I am going to offer up this amazing comment or solution. I don't remember what it was. And I threw it out there, and the president of the region said, no, that's absolutely wrong. That is not what we're doing whatsoever. I would have sworn to you she had walked around the room and hit me in the face. That is how bad my imposter syndrome was, and that insecurity. It felt physical, that she had slapped me in the face. And here the poor woman was just like, you know, it was like a very heated conversation. And she was just like, no. She didn't mean anything by it at all. But my imposter syndrome was like, oh God, they just found out. I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't deserve to be in this room. I don't belong here. And the self-critic kicked in. And I remember having a sleepless night. Here I was in Moscow. Like, how amazingly cool is this? I'm behind the Iron Curtain, back in the late 90s. What an incredible experience. I should have been out just like partying in Red Square. And I'm curled up in the fetal position in my hotel room, just beating myself up, beating myself. Yeah, Jamie's like, oh, you've had that too, right? And, you know, and all it truly was it was a comment that I made that I thought was going to be great, and it wasn't. And it's okay. That's it. Like, when you are rewired to not have this protection mechanism subconsciously, it was like, oh gosh, I thought it was a great comment. Okay, great. Well, let me lean in and listen more. Maybe I missed something. Do you see the difference in reaction? I'm just curious. I didn't mess up. It didn't end my career. In fact, I went on to go work for that woman, and she's one of the best bosses I've ever had, and we're still friends to this day. She's an incredible mentor and leader for women. But that moment, if you had asked me that moment, I thought my career was over, right? I thought, oh God, here it comes. They are now going to know I shouldn't be in the room. And listen, ladies, this is hell. Like, I'm sorry to be so like over the top about it, but that is hell. When I look back on my career and think of all these precious moments that I could have been just reveling in and enjoying and having fun, and then just disconnecting and going home to, you know, play with my family, hang out with my dog, see my daughter, like whatever I could have just been doing that would have just been like so fun, I was just covered in this cloak of disbelief in myself because of imposter syndrome, right? And 99.999% of the clients we work with, that is why they're coming to work with us, not for imposter syndrome, but for the freedom from within. So what we are all looking for, the outcome we're looking for, is how do I navigate my executive career with freedom, where I'm actually comfortable and confident that I can create the environment I want and not constantly be living in fear of the stockholders, the leadership team, all the workload, what my boss thinks, what my client thinks, right? Like, that's what we want freedom of. Yes, we want more time, but the way you create more time is to get free of all that stuff. And then you can go create time, because now you're resolving your work-life balance through possibilities versus clinging to the table from fear. Oh my God, when are they going to find out that nobody knows what I'm doing? I'm going to lose my place at the table. And men just aren't going through this, right? Men are just like, we've talked about this before. Men are like, of course I have a place at the table. Why wouldn't I have a place at the table? Right? Like that's never come into my husband's head once. Like, he's never been like, why would I not have a place at this? Of course, there's a table. Let's all sit here and just do what we need to do. And women are like, ooh, it's a table. Can I sit there? Yeah, we get to sit there, but it sure isn't a very fun ride when we're sitting there with fear and we're sitting there sweating it out. And then that creeps into how we take care of our health, right? Like, one of the coolest celebrations we had on our client call today is one of the clients who's about 6 weeks into working with us. She's like, I said, what's your celebration? She's like, oh my God. She's like, I'm not medicating myself anymore with food. She's like, I'm not like, the other night I was like, I don't really need chocolate tonight. I don't need dessert. I don't need those things anymore. I'm just full. I'm fulfilled. I'm happier. Life's just gotten simpler. And I'm like, yes, that's what it is, right? Because who cares if you have imposter syndrome? Who cares if you have fear? Well, that's why, because where it shows up is in our health. It shows up in our weight. It shows up in our lack of fulfillment in life. There's no joy in this, right? It shows up in how we're parenting our children, whether we're short with them, we're snapping at them, we're having high expectations of them to try to fill our own hole inside, right, our own gap. It comes up in our marriage. You know, my husband used to tell me, he's like, who am I going to get tonight? Am I going to get corporate Kate, or am I going to get Kate, my wife? Right? That's not like, I don't want to go to my grave going, oh my God, my husband had to put up with me for 40 years of marriage. That is not the story I want to be telling, right? I want to go, my husband was ecstatic that he was married to me, and I was ecstatic that I was married to him, and we had a great love story. Not like, oh God, he put up with corporate Kate and all my little idiosyncrasies. That's not who I want to be. So I always want to try to draw that picture back, because I think a lot of times we're like, as achievers, we're trying to solve a problem. I got to solve this imposter syndrome. And it's like, well, why? And the why is the quality of life. It's freedom. What kind of quality of life do we want? Well, the first step is you got to get rid of that fear, because now we can like move about the cabin freely and just start creating the environment we want. And if we're living from a place of self-protection all the time, and that self-protection mechanism is so huge in our life and is so omnipresent, then it infiltrates everything. It infiltrates your relationships with your in-laws, with your family, with your neighbors, you know, with your kids' school, with your colleagues, with your bosses. It's just everywhere. And it's no fun, right? That is no fun. So, you know, the real key for imposter syndrome is to understand that it is not a willpower game, okay? It is not if you're just going to sit there logically and say like, well, of course I'll be great at presenting. Why am I worried about this? They'll love me. It doesn't matter anyways. And, you know, you're kind of doing that stuff. You could do that all day long. And eventually for that one incident, you could kind of get yourself more comfortable with it. But that's a hell of a way to constantly be doing that for every single thing that comes up throughout your life. And where, again, like leadership programs fail women is I think they tell us all the strategies we need to be great leaders, but they don't teach us about our psychology. So if your psychology is saying that strategy that you just taught me doesn't feel comfortable, you won't do it. Or you'll do it, but only with a ton of willpower and lamentation and struggle and grit. And it's just like, God, and then that's why as we move up into the executive ranks, it's just like harder and harder and harder, because we're not actually really making it any lighter. We're just stacking on more stuff, right? So it's, you've got to change how you're working, not just work differently in the sense of the strategies. It's who you are mentally. It's like changing your mental game and being mentally more, have more confidence mentally and emotionally, that really changes the way you can show up, right? And certainly getting rid of imposter syndrome at its root is the first, one of the best first steps. So thank you guys for showing up for this live broadcast and for being here. If you have any comments, please leave them below, and I'm happy to come back to those either live or later when it's recorded. We're always going back to look at those. Share this broadcast. There's a woman out there that you know. You may not know if she has imposter syndrome, but I can almost guarantee you, if she's a high achiever, that this has infiltrated her at some point. Share it, tag her on the broadcast, let her know that you're thinking of her. I think it's a great way for us women to pay it forward. And if you are a high achieving woman, if you're an executive woman, someone who is at that point in your career where you believe and feel like, hey, I should be enjoying this. This should be fun now. I've worked hard to get here and it's not getting any easier. Then I encourage you to book a call with us, right? So that is exactly what we're going to help you discover, which is what's really going on. Is this something that, that we can help you with? If not, that's cool too. We'll get you some other resources, but don't just sit there and feel like it's going to be a trade-off. Don't just sit there and be locked in your psychology and be like, oh God, there's nothing I can do. Change can be scary, but it doesn't have to be, right? If you make the right changes, then it's just freedom. And then it's just like, oh wow, life is so much fun. So again, the URL you want to go to if you want to book that call is kathleenbyers.com/session. And that will get you onto our calendar. 45 minutes. We'll chat about what's going on in your career, what's going on with, your balance in life, and we'll get you a game plan no matter what. All right. So guys, then again, thank you for coming and chatting with us about imposter syndrome, and I will see you soon.